Digital Marketing Radio episode 89, Selecting Images for Websites.
DigitalMarketingRadio.com.
David Gillespie's in the house, and David, welcome to DMR.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here. Hi, everybody.
Well, are you sitting comfortably?
I'm very, very comfortable. I have some water to swig from. It's ready to go.
Well, let's begin.
The big interview with David Bay.
David is CMO of Image Brief, where brands, publishers, and agencies find the right shot and hire photographers. So, David, the quality of photos is obviously important for websites, but a lot of websites don't really necessarily get it right or even see the true value of using a professional photographer. Would you say it's actually really that important to actually be using a professional photographer for your shots on your website?
I mean, when you consider the source, I'm biased, of course, but I mean, absolutely. I'm the son of a photographer, so certainly grown up around kind of great photography. My childhood was documented with quite the keen eye by my dad. I think that the work that we do and the clients that we have, definitely kind of recognize the importance of photography in the right shot, and it varies wildly from client to client. We work across our main kind of segments are, brands, publishers, and agencies, and kind of within those segments, people have very different needs. On the brand side, it can be brand libraries and kind of internal marketing materials. On the agency side, and advertising agencies specifically, obviously, it's kind of high quality campaign imagery, and then publishers, we have a lot of editorial clients and a lot of book clients, people who are publishing need covers for books and that sort of thing, and there we've done everything from working with Condé Nast Traveler regularly to the cover of the last John Grisham novel. So I would say the need varies wildly depending on the type of client, but the desire for quality photography has never been stronger. I think that the key place that we've really found that we can play is kind of almost, I was going to say in opposition to the existing stock sites. Maybe opposition is not the right word, because they certainly serve a niche. Getty Images, Shutterstock, those sorts of sites. The way that we've gone about building kind of the content that we have is kind of working more directly with the photographers rather than building a library of our own. The photographers always going to have the right to say yes or no to a certain sale, and what that's meant is that we've been able to get access to really kind of candid, authentic shots that haven't been taken necessarily originally for commercial purposes, but have been taken out of a love for photography. And again, I'm biased, but I really believe that it shows in the type of content that's out there.
Okay, and you're CMO of Image Brief, imagebrief.com. So obviously you deal in photography. Do you just deal in single shot agreements of unique photographs, or do you actually offer the same photograph sometimes to multiple different clients?
Sure. So I mean, it depends. Every shot that gets uploaded in response to a brief that's come from one of our clients. And sometimes it'll be a royalty-free brief, so a photographer will submit a shot and they'll sell that. But then also, they'll have the ability to sell that to someone else if a similar brief comes along. Or it'll be kind of a rights-managed brief where the client chooses to purchase that image exclusively for a set period of time. So I wouldn't say it's kind of one or the other. It really depends kind of what that client request is. How specific the type of shot is, and all the rest of that. We might work with some more generic travel clients who just are like, oh, we need a shot of New York City, or we need a shot of Sydney or London, and maybe kind of it being kind of particular is not so much of a problem. And then we might get, we had an instance last year of a client needing a shot of a kind of a very specific restaurant in Tel Aviv. It wasn't a famous restaurant, it was just kind of a neighborhood eatery. And so, in that kind of case, tends to be kind of more exclusive. But I mean, it would vary wildly, and very much on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, and You're talking about images that are used in lots of different places there, like books and offline publications as well. Are
Certainly.
your services still used though online for a lot of websites?
Oh, absolutely. I would say the bulk of our excuse me, the bulk of our work would be kind of work that winds up or selling images that wind up kind of online, or at least kind of part of where the agencies are concerned, integrated campaigns. So we did a project with EasyJet last year where it kind of, the shot was kind of used online for display banners and that sort of thing, and on the client's website, but then also wound up kind of being on the side of a bus driving around kind of London. So um, again, it's really driven by what the specific need is for a given client, and it runs the gamut from an image kind of being used for a post on a Facebook feed through to big billboards on the sides of highways.
Okay, and I guess it's really important to consider things like a brand's values and mission before actually selecting images. Is that the kind of conversation that you have with clients, potential clients, before recommending different images?
I mean, absolutely. I think that something that we see in our longer term clients is once we've kind of been onboarded with the brands, we in particular, our photo editors have a much better idea of what they're looking for. So every shot that comes in gets reviewed before it goes in front of a client to make sure that it's on brief and on brand and really suits what they're looking for. Initially, the way that we do that is the initial brief that goes out from our client to our photographers. Um, will have kind of a natural language description of what they're looking for. But you can also upload reference material, and that might be a previous campaign, it might be brand guidelines, it might be a certain shot that they've fallen in love with but can't use for some reason. So we tend to work quite closely with agencies and brands to make sure that the nuances of the brand, the detail, be it color palettes, be it certain ways that people appear in the shots, are really, really on point. I mean, that's really, I think, the kind of the difference that Image Brief can make in the market, where we're able to kind of go to photographers who are mining their hard drives for shots that are just kind of sitting there. 9 times out of 10, that shot exists somewhere in the world. It's just a case of finding it and doing that instead of going and producing a very expensive shoot out in the real world is a huge plus.
And what if you're a reasonably small business? I mean, obviously, you're talking about agencies there as well. So if you're a fairly small business with a bit of a limited budget,
Certainly.
is it still worthwhile investing in a professional photographer, or do you think there are times where perhaps using just something as simple as a decent smartphone could be sufficient, or do you think maybe just for the home page to create that iconic, unique image for their business, it's better off employing some sort of professional photographer?
I think that I think it is fair to say it's so much on a case by case basis, and I think it really depends what a given business is trying to do. I mean, if you are if you're the one coffee shop in a certain town, then you can probably get by with the imagery kind of not being exclusive or not being kind of as high quality. You kind of have a captive audience in that instance. Versus if you're in a big town that's competing with Starbucks and all the rest of that, you don't want the same imagery to show up on your site as theirs, and vice versa. I think that there's the age-old adage that perception is reality, and I think that we're these days a more visually literate group of people than ever before. And I think that if you look at the tools that young people are using coming up, Snapchat being the obvious one, but Instagram's been huge, excuse me, and a couple of other services that are just starting to emerge. The generation coming up are communicating in a way that is so predominantly visual and so visually led that I think it kind of behooves those of us who are in the ability to kind of affect the direction and the identity of the businesses that we're working in and with, to really kind of take imagery seriously and really make sure that each shot that you have representing you is very considered. That doesn't have to be spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars at a time, but I think it is worth investing at least your own kind of time and energy in ensuring that the right shot is on brand and is conveying the message you want it to, regardless of the size of your business.
Okay, so if a business has decided to go for, a decent, professional, unique shot for the
Mm.
homepage of their site, to have that perhaps as the backdrop with some kind of call to action within that image, but
Hmm.
obviously that's an important visual element within the homepage. What are a few tips to actually look for in selecting a decent image? I know it's different depending upon each business, but is it important to have things like your brand colors within there?
Mm.
What about your target audience? Should you actually have people within your image who perhaps represent the kind of people that you're trying to sell to?
Certainly. I think that it can depend so much, as you say, kind of business to business. If it's a florist, the actual people kind of putting the bouquets together, perhaps not as important as the quality of the flowers themselves, and versus if it's more of a professional services offering, then clearly you're going to want really good quality photos of the people who are kind of there representing the business. I don't know that it's necessarily a one size kind of fits all, but I think I would encourage people to kind of consider the segment that they're in and the audience that they're trying to cater to. Another thing I kind of encourage people to do is also, look at the competitors that they have, and there's an opportunity to kind of emulate or do something kind of drastically different in order to kind of prove a point of difference. So you may find that you're in a segment which is kind of where visuals kind of tend to go in a certain fashion, or people do tend to have their brand colors run all the way through, and maybe there's an opportunity to go in the opposite direction of that. Maybe it's a stark color palette, maybe it's black and white, in order to convey a different kind of aesthetic. I think really, I think it just needs to come back to kind of what is the business, what is the brand, and kind of what are the things that are true for you, and then kind of work back from there in terms of what you're trying to convey. I think falling in love with a certain image or certain style to begin with it can be kind of a futile exercise that you really just need to kind of start within.
Yeah, I'm always concerned with a business falling in love with a design or a strap line or an image, because of course, at the end of the day, it's the customer that matters, and
Hmm.
even if you're working within your business, or it's your business and you like what it is visually, and it's not converting, it's not the right thing to do. Um,
100%.
have you ever been involved with user testing or maybe split testing to actually decide on which image to go for in the end?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we do a lot. In image brief, in terms of the landing pages we have our campaigns running to. So we're routinely testing copy. We're testing the imagery that goes along with it to excuse me, to see how they play together, how they don't play together. We're in a constant state of evolution. There was this great Jeff Bezos quote that I saw the other day where he said, "We are stubborn on vision and flexible on details." And that's really something that I've tried to kind of apply to the work that I'm doing and the work that my team is doing every day. It's this is our intent, this is our objective. How we achieve it, I don't mind. As long as we kind of keep kind of you know achieving the goals that we've told the organization we can hit, then I'm really not too worried about how we go about that.
That's a nice quote actually, and how you explained it as well, because it really is important to have that vision in terms of where you want to go as a business.
Mm,
But how you get there isn't necessarily that important,
yeah.
and yeah, it's good to emphasize that.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to, we talked before about just kind of the kind of imagery that might kind of sit on a given site. Um, I've seen a few instances recently where we might have sold, some really nice imagery to businesses and put them online, and only to find out that their product photography just wasn't up to scratch. And I think
Hmm.
that one thing that I would really just encourage people to do is just not to skimp on the core thing that is their business, and for us, while we've built out a platform, our product isn't a website. Our product is the end photography that we're selling, and so that's where the bulk of our efforts go in ensuring that offering is just kind of really quality. And I think that something that certainly happened in the technology space, but I've also had clients before where they kind of forget what business they're really in. We're not a technology business, even though kind of people interact with us via technology. We are a photography business, and that's something that we really need to make sure we don't lose sight of.
Okay, and obviously sharing images online is becoming increasingly popular. It's obviously really popular on Facebook, but you've got specific social networks like Pinterest and Instagram, and you can share on Twitter as well. Would you say there is any particular trend at the moment with businesses starting to focus on one particular social network to share images, or does that again depend on the type of business you're talking about?
I would say even more than the type of business, it really depends on the type of person and the behavior they're kind of likely to exhibit. A really great example that's very close to home for us is that our agency clients and our brand clients tend to use Pinterest for creating mood boards, for kind of getting together kind of a campaign aesthetic or a certain style and that sort of thing. And so there's been a lot of debate kind of internally about, okay, is Pinterest a place where we should be kind of investing more time and effort, and what are the ramifications there in terms of security of the photography and that sort of thing? Because obviously we want to make sure that we're always making sure that the photographers' assets and their shots are protected. For me personally, we've opted to not kind of invest in Pinterest as a platform to go after kind of our audience, because I don't necessarily believe that the frame of mind someone is in when they're on Pinterest is one where they're kind of receptive to a certain message. So I would say, rather than saying we're going to share images on Instagram, or we're going to pursue Facebook, or we're going to pursue Pinterest, for me it really comes back to what are the behaviors that my audience kind of exhibits, and what is the environment or the platform where they're most likely to be receptive to my message. We found Facebook to be a fantastic channel for us for photographer acquisition, rather than more dedicated image platforms such as Instagram. Now, we certainly have a presence on Instagram. We're growing that presence. But it hasn't nearly driven the acquisition that you might think it would, whereas Facebook has been phenomenal for us.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, you would think that something like Pinterest is likely to be better than Facebook for images, but I guess it depends on your target audience and perhaps also the kind of social network that you like interacting on as well, because if you're more comfortable with that, then you're probably going to interact with people in a better, more natural way. I guess.
Absolutely, and something that we don't talk about much is Google Plus, which is incredibly popular among photographers, and it's somewhere that candidly, I don't think we've spent nearly enough time kind of investing in and working with, but and that's just a great example where it's a social network that most of the marketing world have kind of left for dead, which is fine. But if you're in a photography business, it can't be ignored. And so I think part of that is just kind of really getting in to understand the person you're trying to talk to and trying to reach, because there are these pockets of the web, and perhaps much smaller than Google Plus, perhaps much bigger than Google Plus. There are these communities out there that that are just sitting below the surface, and it's worth taking the time just to kind of dig around and talk to your consumers and your customers and find out where they are spending time, because you might find these kind of nuggets of gold out there that nobody else is looking at.
Well, let's segue into the second section of our discussion. So that focuses more on your thoughts on where digital marketing in general has been and where it's heading. So sure. Starting off with
software I couldn't live without.
Well, what software do you currently use in your business? If someone took away from you, it would significantly impact your marketing success.
I love the sound bites. I want more of them, not less.
I don't know if they're too cheesy or they're comments, please.
Yeah. I basically work So I do a lot, obviously a lot of writing in my role, and I basically live solely within Evernote now. That I really couldn't live without, and be kicking and screaming if it went away. Um, we've recently started working with a tool called Optimizely, which
Okay.
is a relatively straightforward way of being able to A/B test different elements of your site, so copy, imagery, that sort of thing, and you can segment that based on someone coming from a Google search versus somebody coming from a Facebook ad and that sort of thing, and be driving them to the same place but displaying different content relatively easily. And we're in early days with that, but we're really enjoying it. And the third thing I would say is purely from not from a visual point of view, not from photography necessarily, but just when we're looking at different designs and different campaigns we want to produce. There's a great platform called Envision, which has really kind of streamlined workflow in terms of being able to comment on work, being able to suggest edits and that sort of thing. And it's a very simple interface, and an image will come up. You can click somewhere on it, put a comment in, and that'll just kind of leave a marker for the designer to know that that's where a comment's been made. And it's really kind of streamlined communication for us.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for those recommendations. I will include links to all of them inside the Digital Marketing Radio newsletter, so digitalmarketingradio.com, and just sign up for the newsletter, and I will send that out as an email shot. But moving on to...
I wish I would have.
I'd like you to look back on the very first day that you're involved in trying to market a business online. What didn't you do so well? What do you wish that you would have done differently?
Oh, David, I'm kind of giving away my age here. I mean, we're going back going back a decade plus.
That's not too far.
That's well, I suppose it depends. Yeah. What I think that one thing that I didn't do well, and I think didn't do well for a number of years. It took a while for this lesson to kind of sink in. Is I did not invest kind of enough time and energy, and this is coming back from that day I was on the agency side of things. I did not invest enough time in really kind of taking clients along for the journey. So I've learned over time the kind of the magic of storytelling and kind of taking a more collaborative approach with the work that I was doing, and purely from an agency point of view, and I suppose from a kind of building equity with kind of colleagues and clients. I found, the more involved people kind of feel in a process, the more likely they are to kind of find the outcome agreeable. And I suppose it's kind of, for me, it's been less about kind of a specific kind of tactic or platform or movement that I missed or anything like that. And it's really just been, I suppose, as a communications professional, being a better communicator. And when I've managed to do that, the results have kind of spoken for themselves.
Interesting. So do you think that in the past you maybe had too much of a one-size-fits-all approach, and you perhaps didn't listen enough to your clients then? Or were you actually delivering that bespoke solution, but you just weren't involving them enough?
I think very, very much the latter. I kind of took the approach that, well, you kind of brought me in to solve a problem, and I'll go in and solve the problem, and you kind of come back in 2 weeks and you go, oh, problem solved. And I think when people see that, they're like, technically, yes, but what they don't kind of see is kind of the 2 weeks of kind of deliberation, ideas that kind of were tossed out and all the rest of it. And it can seem almost kind of flippant or arbitrary as opposed to kind of taking people along that journey. And I think that while that's kind of been true of my professional life, I think you also see that in, certain campaign work or certain communication pieces, and perhaps it bleeds a little bit more into PR and that sort of thing. But I find kind of not just involving stakeholders, but involving consumers. And for us at Image Brief, we work very closely with our community. We involve our photographers and we involve our buyers in kind of the changes we're making to the platform, get their feedback, get their thoughts. And sometimes we agree and sometimes we disagree, but I think just bringing people along for that journey and help making them part of the story has been tremendously helpful in our own product development, our own communication, and I think that's probably a truism regardless of industry.
It's interesting. It's actually a lesson about personalities as well, because some people perhaps might prefer just that solution at the end and can't be bothered with that communication between getting the project and actually getting it done. But a lot of personalities do want that interaction. It's important to understand what kind of personality your clients get and make sure that you're tailoring what you do towards them.
You know, I think that's incredibly insightful, because I'm certainly of the personality that when working with my team, it's kind of come and tell me if there are problems, come and tell me if there are issues. Otherwise, cool, that's what we're doing, and let me know when it's done. And you know, I think that it can be not only a narcissistic but a self-destructive in some cases approach to working life and communications. There's I used to joke with friends at a certain agency that our client was not the same as their customer, and so we always need to make sure that we were creating work for the customer and not necessarily just for the client. And in that same fashion, recognizing that the people we're working with aren't wired the same way we are, and as you say, kind of figuring out how they like to work and how they like to be communicated with is key.
Okay, well, moving on to
the this or that round.
So this is a quick response round. 10 quick questions, just 2 rules. Try not to think about the answer too much, and you're only allowed to say the word both on one occasion. Ready to go?
Absolutely.
Email or Twitter?
Email.
Audio or video?
Video.
Affiliates or display advertising?
Display.
Facebook or Google Plus?
For us, Google Plus. Probably everybody else, Facebook.
Online press releases or one-on-one relations?
One-on-one relations.
Paid search or SEO?
SEO.
Email contact form or telephone number?
Telephone number.
Website or app?
Website.
Social subscriber or email subscriber?
Email subscriber.
And local marketing or global marketing?
Oh, that depends so much. Can I say both depending?
That's the one. That's perfect.
Okay.
Oh, and apart from that one, probably the one you struggled with most was website or app, and that was interesting. So do you have a lot of clients that are getting good business out of apps and perhaps using what you do in apps then as well?
I think that it depends. If that's kind of much like the last one, it like depends could be the answer so much. I think that there was such a trend, the last, perhaps not the last couple of years, but certainly kind of the 3-4 years before that, and maybe since the launch of the iPhone, everybody needed an app. Didn't matter kind of what it was, you had to have an app. And the way that we're kind of looking at ideas and kind of things that you do that are essentially kind of marketing, we treated apps as marketing for a while, and the thing there is, you're kind of engaged, either kind of to drive people towards a product, or as an agency, to help your client drive people towards a product. And if this is kind of the product, you kind of want people just going straight to the product. But apps kind of became, this thing over here. So it was like getting someone's attention, getting them into the app in order to kind of get them to the product. And it kind of became, I think, a little bit self-defeating. And obviously there are success stories in there, there was a campaign a few years back that Barclays did with the water slide, which was quite effective and kind of well integrated. And everyone kind of remembers the Carling beer app that would kind of be a pint of beer that you drank as you tipped your iPhone on the side and it was one of the first ones that came out. But I think that there's always there's this creative tension between novelty and utility. And if something's kind of novel, it's going to kind of get attention. If it's something that's kind of has utility, then it's going to be useful, and kind of the trick is kind of blending those two things as much as possible. And probably the best example of that I think still has been Nike Plus, where it's kind of kept that magic going. I think that, you know, so many of the things that get done are just kind of novel, and they're kind of these flash in the pan things that might get a lot of attention and, you know, and win the internet for a day. Do they kind of is there that return on investment, particularly with brands where you know, if they've got engaged a big agency and they're spending, you know, a couple $100,000 building an app and then a few $1 million in media spend to promote it and that sort of thing, you know, versus, you know, one of the examples I keep coming back to is the success of the old Spice campaign, you know, the man your man could smell like, and I kind of remember reading this kind of this piece at the time, which was kind of intended to kind of provoke and was kind of being a little bit obtuse for the sake of it, but it was talking about how there was a certain coupon that went into the market at the same time, and that, you know, had a really good kind of redemption rate. And was it the commercial, you know, is that commercial really one that was going to promote people and or encourage people to actually go and buy this relatively ordinary deodorant? You know, if you look at kind of what was kind of broader trends at the time, you know, economy slowing down, people becoming more spendthrift, and all the rest of it, it kind of became a perfect storm. And so, you know, I think that, you know, when you're looking at kind of website or app or, you know, whatever the next thing happens to be, you know, here in the US, there's a podcast called Serial that has just been really popular in NPR. So, you know, now there's like, oh, we've got to go find a podcast to sponsor. And, you know, I mean, aside from digital marketing radio, we should find some other podcast to sponsor. And it's like, that's kind of a flash in the pan, and everyone's going to be looking for the next Serial. It kind of defeats the point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's while you were saying that, I was also actually thinking about search engine optimization, because that's a lot of my background. And 10 plus years ago, it was a lot easier to rank for something. Mm-hmm. So it would have been certainly fairly easy to rank for something like, off the top of my head, UK travel. Mm-hmm. But that's not necessarily, for most businesses, even travel businesses, going to be a term that converts. Because someone is probably in browsing mode then. So just because you can drive lots of traffic at your business or your website, your app, it's not necessarily the right thing to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, and that's where, you know, to go back to the kind of testing that we do. You know, sometimes we'll kind of look at you know, channels that might be driving a lot of traffic but just simply not converting, versus maybe kind of going with other channels that don't nearly drive as much, but convert at a much higher rate. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we want photographers to sign up, we want buyers to sign up, and whatever helps us do that in the most effective fashion are the things that we're going to pursue. And it's very easy to get distracted by the bright shiny object, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody. But I think, you know, going back to something I said before, it kind of really just kind of goes back to what is that intent that we're trying to pursue. And if we're hypothesis driven and we say, okay, we think that doing this will have X, Y effect, okay, great, we can test that. You know, we can put that into market for 2 weeks, and we can learn very quickly. We're lucky that we're a small enough organization that we can be quite nimble with the tests that we do. You know, some of the larger, you know, companies out there don't have that luxury.
Okay, well, let's just move on to
the $10,000 question.
If I was to give you $10,000 and you had to spend it over the next few days on a single thing to grow your business, what would you spend it on, and how would you measure success?
Certainly. You know, for me, this is a really easy one. You know, we kind of have the opposite problem to a lot of companies right now, which is that, you know, I mean, content marketing has been the go-to buzzword for the last kind of 12, 18 months. And so companies have been scrambling to kind of create content, you know, and at ImageBrief, we kind of have the opposite problem. We have so much content that, as someone who, you know, part of my job is to make sure we use it really well. You know, some days I wake up going, I have no bloody idea what to do with all of this stuff. So I would go and find myself an amazing content strategist who could come in and sit by my side for a couple of days kind of churn through it, give me 100 ideas, and that I could then kind of work with my team to kind of produce and execute. I'm a big believer in investing in kind of having a trusted outside opinion that can kind of stick their nose in every now and then and say, what if you did this? You know, it's so hard kind of working in a business to step outside and work on the business, if you get my meaning.
Mm-hmm. And do you find it easy to actually distill the value of someone's advice, to actually decide whether or not it is actually a good idea and worthwhile implementing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think a lot of that comes back to the quality of the brief that they get given kind of initially. I think that when it comes to kind of creativity, at the end of the day, it's going to be subjective, the same way that the right image for a certain campaign or a certain client is always going to be subjective. So I think that, if you kind of get the right brief in place, then you're going to get a person's interpretation of that brief back. Then it just comes down to, a certain preference. That, the person has blue eyes and I wanted someone with brown eyes. The flowers are purple, I was hoping for daisies. It's, there are always those kind of intangibles that, we're getting better at finding, within our business, the longer we work with people. But in any creative pursuit, it's just going to come down to differences of opinion.
My number one takeaway.
Slightly quick on the on the thumb there, I'm afraid. But no, you've offered a lot of great advice. I think that just about takes us towards the end of our discussion. So, I mean, what would you say summarizes the number one takeaway? What would you say is the number one step that our listeners need to take away and implement in their own businesses?
I would say the number one thing would be just whatever you're doing, just take it back to the consumer, take it back to the person you're trying to reach. Don't get worried about the hot platform of the day, the app, the buzzword, whatever, because there's going to be a new one tomorrow. Stay focused on your consumer, keep the voice of your customer kind of in your ear at all times. And I think if you stay close to them, then everything else will sort itself out.
Great. Okay. Well, what's the best way for our audience to find out more about you and what you do?
You know what? We'd love it if they came and said hi on Twitter. I'm just at David Gillespie. You can also go to davidgillespie.com, and there's a bunch of links there. So please come and say hello and tell me all the things you agree with. Tell me all the things you disagree with. They're welcome in equal measure.
Lovely. Okay, and I'll include notes to all of those links again on digitalmarketingradio.com. So, but anyway, no, thanks again.
Thank you, David.
And thank you, dear listener and dear watcher. We'll catch up again soon.
Digital Marketing Radio, Digital Marketing Radio, Digital Marketing Radio.com.
Wave goodbye, David.
Bye.